Greetings, booktubers. Welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite science fiction authors of all time, Robert A. Heinlein. His book, Red Planet, originally published in 1949, and the editor from H.E. Double Hockey Sticks, the editor from Hades, who absolutely went to war with Robert A. Heinlein over this book here, Red Planet, and other books of Robert A. Heinlein's that were published all the way for over a decade before and after the publication of the third in his juvenile series. So what we're going to do here today, we're going to talk about the book itself. We're going to talk about Red Planet. This is a 2006 edition by Del Rey Books. This is the unedited manuscript by Robert A. Heinlein that I just finished reading. His original manuscript. This is the edited version that was put out in 1949 after the editor from Hades got a hold of it and just absolutely went through it with a vengeance. And we're going to talk about that confrontation here and how it played out. But first, what I want to do is I want to talk about the book itself, Red Planet, and just review it as a science fiction young adult novel of Robert A. Heinlein's, published all the way back in 1949. So the book here, Red Planet by Robert A. Heinlein, 1949, published by Scribner's. It's the third in his juvenile series. It's the third one that he published. And it is a rollicking adventure romp set upon the planet Mars in the near future as Earth is trying to colonize Mars. Now, going forward here, there will be some minor spoilers, minor to medium, but no major spoilers. So you've been warned. So the main characters in here are Jim Marlowe and his buddy Frank. Jim and Frank are teenagers who are the sons of colonists who have been sent to Mars by the company. And the company has sent up these colonists in order to terraform Mars, in order to make it habitable for Earthlings so that they can relieve overpopulation upon the planet Earth. And these original colonists are there, and Mars is full of life. This is the Mars of 1949, not of 2025. So you have to keep that in mind. And there are canals on Mars. There are Martians. It is filled with flora and fauna. And they have Martians who are sentient beings that are every bit as smart as human beings that are living there, but they are in decline. Their cities are large and abandoned for the most part, but they're still present there, as well as a whole bunch of other different types of plants and animals. Which brings us to the third main character in the book here. Jim Marlowe has a best friend that is a Martian alien being known as a bouncer. And this is just like a small furry ball that can extend various pseudopods out of it when it needs it, in order to use these pseudopods for locomotion or in order to manipulate objects or to emerge out as eye stalks. But also very importantly here to the novel, this bouncer named Willis, it acts as a perfect voice recorder. So any conversation that is said within the presence of Willis can be recorded perfectly by this bouncer, this alien Martian bouncer, and then repeated back just like if you had a tape cassette recorder. And that plays heavily into the book here. So the book starts with Frank and Jim turning of age in order to go to the company school, the company technical college that trains teenagers, the sons and daughters of these colonists that they have sent to Mars in order to terraform it, in order to make them productive and skilled citizens to carry on the work of their parents. And they have arrived at this technical college with Jim carrying Willis with him because they're inseparable. Willis is not a pet. Willis is Jim's best friend and a Martian bouncer. They arrive at the school right as the old headmaster is rotating out and the new headmaster is coming in. And the new headmaster quickly becomes the main antagonist and the villain of the book, because the new headmaster is an authoritarian and dictatorial headmaster that starts imposing an absolute dictatorship over these free-willing individualistic and rugged kids of these colonists here on the planet Mars. And this kicks off the confrontation that starts the entire snowball of this book rolling here, the snowball of the plot. And that confrontation begins with the headmaster attempting to confiscate Willis from Jim. And this sets off a rebellion within the school. Jim and Frank flee the school, and the school and the company are pursuing them across the face of Mars. And Jim and Frank have to use their wits and their rugged individualism in order to survive on this hostile planet and evade the company and the government of Earth that rules Mars in absentia, who are trying to hunt them down. And this rebellion by these kids here at the school, by Frank and Jim, and eventually the rest of the students, snowballs into a giant rebellion between the colonists, the company, and the government of Earth that is ruling Mars in absentia. And that, in essence, is the plot here of Red Planet. It is a fantastic adventure plot novel by Robert A. Heinlein, set on this fabulous alien planet. You have laser beam fights, these giant laser beam battles. You have ice skating on the frozen canals of Mars at 200 plus miles an hour. You have these two teenage boys discovering these lost and abandoned and hidden underground alien cities of the Martians. And it's a fabulous book. I highly recommend it just as a straight adventurous read. As a good Robert E. Heinlein young adult novel, it is one of the better ones, and I do recommend it. So that is the book. There are a number of themes that are running here through the book that Robert E. Heinlein presents in it. It works on several levels. You get that surface level adventure plot, that alien science fiction adventure that's done just wonderfully. But running under that are themes of, again, individualism, of rugged individualism, self-reliance, and the rights of individuals that supersede the rights of a government. And most importantly here to the book and the novel, and to our editorial conflict that is coming up, that those rights, the only way that a citizen, that an individual can preserve his rights against encroachment from a government, which Robert E. Heinlein felt was inevitable. He viewed governments as something just one cut above street gangs, that the only way that an individual can preserve his rights is by the use of armed force and the threat of armed force through an armed citizenry. And that is one of the major points here in the book. Now, you can agree with Robert E. Heinlein's political points or disagree with them, but those are what he writes here into the book. That is the points that he presents. They're not necessarily my points, my political viewpoints. I will never express my personal political viewpoints here on the channel. I just won't do that. But going over what the political viewpoints of the author are and putting forth what he has written here is absolutely fair game. And it's essential here to this book. And anytime you're talking about Robert E. Heinlein, you're going to be forced to talk about his politics because he injects his politics of extreme libertarianism into virtually everything that he writes. This book is also notable, though, because it acts as the foundation, is the foundational book for many of the other novels that Robert E. Heinlein would write for his adult science fiction later in his career, most notably A Stranger in a Strange Land and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. So for Stranger in a Strange Land, the Martians, the entire Martian culture of the predominant Martian alien species in here, the whole backsetting of Mars, that is the backsetting and backstory and the background and the characteristics that he takes wholesale out of Red Planet and he drops it straight into Stranger in a Strange Land, up to and including all of the water ceremonies that are so important to the novel Stranger in a Strange Land. And the entire theme that goes on here of a revolt, of a rebellion against the government in absentia is basically, is basically the foundation and a dry run here for The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. Stranger in a Strange Land and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, two of his most popular books. This is where he lays the foundation for those two future novels. So that is a good point. That's an really interesting point with this book as well. So let's move on to the editor from HE Double Hockey Sticks. So 1992, Del Rey Books, this is a 2006 edition, publishes the unedited manuscript. And at this point, I need to go off on a slight tangent, and I need to thank Pat over at Book Chat with Pat, because it was her over on her fantastic BookTube channel, which I will link down in the description below, who keyed me into the publication of the unedited manuscript. So thank you, Pat. I just finished the unedited manuscript. I loved it. It was a great read and a great comparison. And speaking of the comparison, what happened with this editor? Who is this editor? Who is this editor from Hades? Well, this editor is Alice Dalgleish. Alice Dalgleish was a British citizen. She was born in the British West Indies in the 1890s. At the end of the Victorian era, she emigrates to the United States when she's 13 years old, and she becomes a young adult author in her own right. She's very popular. She has 3 of her books that are nominated for Newbery Awards, and based on the strength of her career as an author, Scribner's hires her to be the main editor for their YA series. And so she is the editor who is editing all of Robert A. Heinlein's manuscripts as he submits them over to Scribner's, including Red Planet here. And unsurprisingly, being born at the end of the Victorian era, she is a very, very conservative editor. She's a very conservative author, and she was a librarian. And she's editing these books knowing that many of these young adult books are going to go out to a large number of the libraries across the United States of America, into the elementary schools, where they're going to have to get past the librarians who are going to read them to see if they're appropriate for their students. So she's editing with that in mind. And the first level edits that she does in this book is she goes through as a normal editor and she's just tightening up language, but she does it with a heavy hand. She comes in like Attila the Hun and she edits almost on every single page here of Robert E. Heinlein's original manuscript. And we know this because Robert E. Heinlein wrote about it in his letters and his correspondence, which was later published by his wife in Grumbles from the Grave. And that's how we have this information. Then she comes back through and she re-edits it using the viewpoint of Freudian social and sexual psychology. So she comes through using Freudian sexual innuendo and edits out entire chapters and pages out of the book here, particularly dealing with Willis. Because at one point in here, Willis, the alien bouncer, the friend of Jim, the main protagonist, the main character, lays eggs. And in Alice Dalglish's viewpoint, the fact that Jim was always around with this bouncer, with this alien bouncer, Willis, that they stayed together all the time, implied a sexual innuendo, a sexual relationship between Jim and Willis. I'm not making it up. This is from Alice Dalgleish. And so she removes any of that out of there because of the sexual Freudian innuendo. Robert E. Heinlein is so incensed over this that later, after the publication of this book, he went out and he found one of Alice Dalglish's own YA novels, and then he applied a sexual Freudian innuendo and psychology to her book and just tore it up and sent it off to Dalgleish for her to look at his edits. The point being that you can turn almost anything into a sexual innuendo if you want to. Now, as an editor, when you go beyond just trying to make the book read better, to make the flow of the language better, and even trying to take out some potentially offensive language for children that you might deem as inappropriate, when you take that one level beyond and you start editing out the political themes of the author because you don't approve of the author's political ideas, of his political themes that he's put into the book, you have gone one step beyond. You have exceeded your mandate as an editor and then some. You have gone from being a heavy-handed editor to the editor from H.E. Double Hockey Sticks. And Alice Dalgleish does that. She edits out any type of references to the Second Amendment, to freedoms of individuals being based upon the Second Amendment, or to armed kids walking around and having the potential to use these weapons that they're carrying in the schools. It all gets cut out of the book. She can't cut all of it out, but she cuts out as much of it as she can while still preserving the main plot of the book here. And in particular, there's one passage that she wipes out that's going to illustrate this point. And it's on page 64 of the unedited manuscript. So on page 64, the headmaster has just ruled that all the students at this technical college must turn in their weapons and they no longer have the right to carry weapons in the school. And this is Jim and Frank responding to it. Jim and Frank read it together. "This is the worst one yet," said Jim. "The right to bear arms is guaranteed," Doc says. "It's the basis of all freedom." And that is the point throughout the novel that Robert E. Heinlein is trying to make. That's his point. And Alice Dalgleish takes that entire paragraph and takes it and expunges it here from the original manuscript. Because I went back to that spot and looked through the book here and it's gone. She took out any type of reference to the Second Amendment, which was the main theme of what Robert E. Heinlein was trying to get across in his point that governments will take the rights of an individual unless that individual can resist that government and resist that government via an armed citizenry. And again, you can disagree with it, you can agree with it, but it was the point that Robert E. Heinlein was trying to make. And as an editor, you don't have that right in order to change the politics that the author has written into the book. And that is why Alice Dalgleish is the editor from Hades. Now, in the back of the book, they give examples of how bad her editing was, how extensive it was, where she took out entire pages of the original manuscript. And that's the X that you see through there. This is the original manuscript and Alice Dalgleich's editorial markings on the manuscript, where she has deleted out complete pages. And not only has she just taken out pages and changed things and removed political remarks, but at the end of the book, the very last pages right here, these are the last two pages of Red Planet, she changed the ending of the story. that had nothing to do with politics. It had nothing to do with references to bathrooms that she objected to for children in elementary schools. It had nothing to do with the flow of the story. She just didn't like his ending to the book, so she cut it off. And the ending was beautiful. It's a beautiful ending of the book that she chops off at the end here of the 1949 version of Red Planet. And that is why Alice Dalgleish goes down as the editor from Hades. Now, this combat between Heinlein and Alice Dalgleish, it continued. It continued past 1949, and it continued all the way up until 1959. And in 1959, it came to a head because Robert A. Heinlein submits this book to Scribner's Starship Troopers. And the politics in this book were so conservative that Scribner's just outright refused to publish the book in any form. And at that point, Robert A. Heinlein took his business, he left Scribner's, and he went to Putnam and had Putnam publish Starship Troopers. And at that point forward, that was the last of his juveniles. Heinlein moved then forward into writing adult fiction, Strange in a Strange Land, Friday, Podkayne of Mars, Job, A Comedy of Justice, and all those others. But Alice Dalgleish may have had the last laugh. And the reason I say that is because when Heinlein went over and started working and publishing his adult fiction away from Scribner's, there came a point in his career where he needed a strong editor. He needed some form of Alice Dalgleish to reel him in, with Time Enough for Love being one of the prime examples, where he took a social taboo and used it as a literary tool in order to make a point, and he did an excellent job of it. But then in the last chapter, he just goes way beyond the norms. He just takes that social taboo and he pushes it to the extreme and then past the extreme. And he needed Alice Dalgleish at that point to bring him back in. And without having that strong editor later in his career, I think it did impact him negatively, where he didn't have that Alice Dalgleish there to reel him back in and trim back some of those excesses that he wrote in his later books. And I think his reputation, his career suffered for it. But that's it. That's Robert A. Heinlein and his confrontation with the editor from Hades. With that, I'm going to wrap this one up. But if you have opinions on Robert A. Heinlein, on Alice Dalgleish and her edits, put it down in the comments section below. I'd love to hear about it. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. And I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I will catch you guys next time.